Well, since I'm up here, I might as well say my piece. And I hate to have to read this off of this device because I hated these. But I've lost my notes and it's on here. So I wanted to recite a poem that she and I both enjoyed over about the last 10 years. And I found this poem, and it's I think it expresses how she felt about life and about dying. And it's called I Did Not Die. Do not stand at my grave and forever weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn's rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and forever cry. I am not there. I did not die. So I'm to share that. And no, I don't think she has died, and her body's gone, and she's in our memories, and she's out in the matrix out there. She was a huge influence on my life. She was my mom, and she gave me life. And I've thought a lot that if that's all she would give me, I'd be totally satisfied. She was she was not always easy to be the son of. But she was a great influence, and she did wondrous things. And one of them was being grandmother to my 2 daughters. And I live in New Mexico. She'd come and visit, and she would take them off, the 2 daughters, when they were little. And she'd take them to the hotel with her, and they'd pack up their things in their little bathing suits and whatever, and they just loved going off with grandma, you know. And that was wonderful. And then later, they both took turns working at the Moose for the summer, and he lovingly called it boot camp. Go to and it was like finishing school for them, you know. But they both adored their grandma, and she adored them. And I guess the only other thing is I did a little CD video for Mom, I think when she was 84, 85, and Hal's got it on his computer and is going to run it in there after we finish here. So those who'd like to see that, I think it's about 30, 40 minutes, 30 something.
No, it's 20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay.
You
So
could just loop it.
and
And
I
have
think,
people go in.
yeah. So you can enjoy that, but I thank you all for coming, and I want to hear from other people too.
Thank you. Thanks, Dad.
Do you want me to stand up?
I apologize in advance if it's a little long. Where do I begin? This is what I asked myself when thinking about what I wanted to share today about my grandmother. After all, there is a lot to say about someone who has been such a significant part of your life. So I will begin at the very first memory that my grandmother had of me. It is one that she shared with me many times, and it took place on the day I was born. My grandmother told me about how she drove through a blizzard to the hospital to see me, and she got lost in Kingston, New York, trying to find the hospital. She walked into the YMCA and asked for her daughter Ginger at the front desk. She was aghast as she looked around, thinking that this was the place that her newborn granddaughter had been born. It wasn't the cleanest of places, and you can only imagine her face as she looked around. But all that mattered was that my mother and I were doing well, and she couldn't wait to see us. When she realized that it was not the Benedictine hospital, she left, feeling quite relieved. I believe that I am one of the luckiest granddaughters, and I cannot imagine my life had it not had a Grandma Ethel in it. After all, how many granddaughters have shared a home and a workplace, all of us, with their grandmother? Living with my grandmother on Du Bois Avenue is where many of my memories begin. I served her toy food as she lay in bed watching TV wearing her marabou slippers. She even let me massage her feet. Little did I know how much she was enjoying being treated like a queen after a long day. I was always in awe of my grandmother's makeup collection, and I often sat at her makeup table looking at all of the colorful eyeshadows and sneaking a little for myself, thinking that no one would know. Perhaps that is why, as an adult, I frequently purchased new makeup for her, especially her favorite red lipstick. As a little girl, I spent hours in the moose, sitting on the brown wooden stool at the end of the counter, watching as my grandmother would prepare sandwiches and salads. I would happily jump down from my spot to take the pineapples from the refrigerator and blot them with a paper towel for the Duke of Windsor. I had those ingredients memorized. I would go in and out of the moose like it was my second home. Everyone knew that my grandmother owned the moose, and I loved being a part of Seacliff in this way. Although being the only kid at the lunch table with a plantation delight or a poor boy with a frilly little blue, green, yellow, or red toothpick sticking out of it was not always easy. My friends did not tease me, and later on told me they were envious of my delicious and unique lunches. For most of my life, I knew my grandmother as a working woman. Her life was centered around running her business, yet she still made time to be with her family. When I was in the 6th grade, I experienced the death of a close family friend. My grandmother attended the funeral with us, and when my mom continued on to the cemetery, I went home with Grandma. It was on this day that she took me to A&S, a former department store, and brought me to the shoe department, where she bought me my very first pair of pumps. It was not a high heel, for as my grandmother says, you don't need such a high heel, and they were a classic tan color. These are just a few of the moments that have remained with me throughout my life. We shopped, we ate, we played games in the kitchen like Moose Bop. We sailed tinfoil boats down the running streams of Seacliff Avenue on rainy days. She sent me on errands to the bank, the hardware store, the stationery store, and even the liquor store. I knew everyone on that block. I became close with Beatrice Bailey, a very good friend of my grandmother's, who owned an antique store down the block. My grandmother loved for me to sit and talk with Beatrice, who was at the time in her 80s. She couldn't get over how we got along. As an adult, even when I moved away from Long Island, we continued to go to the Moose at least every other weekend. This isn't a visit, she would say, but it was what we had to do to see her. Even in her rushed and busy state, she always let me into the kitchen to say hello, or managed to come out. Once my children were born, she would lead them around the shop, letting them gently touch the hanging parrots. So much of who I am and what I think about the world has been shaped by my grandmother. Her knowledge of politics, her family stories, her strength and independence in so many life situations, her sense of fashion and style, her many talents and passions will forever be imprinted in my mind. While I only shared just one phase of her life, I feel that this phase was an important one. For it was in this phase that she could recall all of the others. In recent years, I've been lucky to enjoy my grandmother in different ways, sitting on her deck eating Chinese takeout and talking about the beautiful flowers, sharing magazine subscriptions like Bazaar and Marie Claire, which she really didn't like, with my entire family eating shepherd's pie or chicken soup, seated at an elegantly dressed table. My kids loved that she always had bread and butter and encouraged them to eat it. She would give them tins filled with coins and let them go count them in the living room, or take out a rainbow of markers and paper and let them draw pictures. She never worried that there were 3 young children in a living room filled with antiques and delicate glass items. They loved looking around at elephants, frogs, birds, tigers, and elk that lived in her home. I myself found comfort in being there listening to music and letting her serve us. We always looked forward to the grand finale of dessert, whether it was vanilla ice cream with chocolate sauce or strawberry shortcake. Wherever we went, she enjoyed talking to the salespeople, waiters, or fellow customers. She would chat with families and their children. On our last outing to the diner where we watched the inauguration together, She noticed a little girl who was about 2 years old and had silver sequin boots on. She could not get over how cute she was and made sure to tell her mother. Just 3 years ago at Lord & Taylor by my home, Grandma and I were at the scarf counter buying matching scarves. When the sales lady told me how beautiful my mother was, I felt proud to have her by my side. It is funny that on the Thursday evening in which she passed, as we sat holding hands, she told me that she really didn't like being called Grandma. And that I said it too much. Well, I've called you Grandmama, and sometimes when I call you, I say, "Hi, Gram." "Yes, Gram," she said. "I like Gram." Well, Gram, I miss you, wherever you are. I'd like to believe you are sitting in your living room watching the movie about the Marabunta ants, or lying in bed watching Dr. Phil or Oprah, or putting a cake into the oven, or out gallivanting. But I know that is not so. So instead, perhaps you are dressed in sequins or a fur coat with your face fully painted, and you are dancing and whirling about with Aunt Rhoda, Aunt Dorothy, Aunt Evelyn, Uncle Mitchell, Great-Grandma May, Great-Grandpa Ben, Grandpa Oscar and Jerry, and so many more who have passed before you. For now I feel comforted, being surrounded by people you have touched and inspired in so many different ways, and knowing that you will live on in all of us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sabra.
Yes, okay, it's going to be 53 minutes.
No, it's not short, but I want to say something.
You can sit there.
Yes.
You can stay
Stay
there.
there.
Believe me, you'll hear me.
This is the singer. She's the singer. She said she's from the diaphragm.
Right. I just want to say, this is very impromptu, but when you speak from the heart, you don't need to write anything down. These people in this room who were fortunate enough to be related by blood had one thing in common. I was related by friendship. I knew Ethel 53 years. I'm probably one of the last surviving friends she has. And I want to say a few things about her. I knew the two kids, I knew Ginger and Ken when she lived in Forest Hills. I met them as very small children. She was a very dynamic, I call her a Renaissance woman. This woman could cook, she could sew, she could put the most beautiful table setting on the table. She also had a flair for design. Any house that she did, including the one in Long Island, was something to be in house beautiful. She had a talent that was enormous. She painted, and she had a feeling for people that really, really are exemplified by the way she lived her life. She was unique. I don't think we'll find anybody like that around anymore. And before I married my husband, who I'm married to for 51 years, who came here from Italy, she was the first person who met him before I married him. We had wonderful times together. We went to parties. She gave dinner parties. She knew my mother and father. I knew her mother, May, and my mother's name was May also. I remember when she loved driving around in her little convertible. She was an excellent driver. She would drive all the way to see Kenny. I remember when Kenny was in the Peace Corps. I remember when he was in college. I remember, excuse me, some of the boyfriends she had. And I met her through somebody, an acquaintance that I had in my lifetime. And you think you meet these people en passant, but it wasn't. It was a lifetime friendship. When we got on the phone, because there was nobody could talk to her about the things I did, so we'd be on the phone for an hour or more. When she moved away to Connecticut, which she loved that home, I felt very sad that I wouldn't be able to come and see her at the Moose or whatever it was. But she adored her family. She was very close. Her kids were close with her, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But I have to say one thing. This was a very talented, loving, wonderful woman. She knew me when I was single. She knew me when I was pregnant. She knew me when I had my son Rick. Rick was in her house all the time, and he used to call Ashka. He wasn't too small to even talk. He had a real soft spot in his feeling for Ethel, because Ethel came into your family. She didn't have to be born there. She entered your life with feeling and sparkle and elegance. Her beautiful raincoat and hat, the blue one. Everybody knew that one. Knew her first. Everybody knew her. She had taste. She had taste extraordinary. I mean, she was just a very, very high-end woman. But I want to close in one thing. You know what Sinatra said? She did it her way.
Thank you.
Kato's gonna share.
I have notes because I get nervous in front of a whole bunch of people. But I just wrote this as a letter to my grandma. And I lived in New Mexico too. But that's something that I always did, was write my grandma letters to keep in touch with her, and I knew that she loved hearing everything I had to say. And it made her happy. So, my dear Grandma Ethel, what is it that I would like to say to you? I just said memories. I loved sitting on the couch with you, drinking tea and sharing. I felt special when you told me intimate things about your life. And special when you listened to me. Thanks for always telling me to place a high value on myself. I ran naked as a baby with balloons in your grass. And you thought I was precious. I thought you were precious too. I ran circles around your tree. This was another time. And then climbed up in your lap and knew you were delighted in me. And I delighted in you. And you sent me cards and drew little kitty cats on them. And I loved all the gifts you gave. You sent me and gave me. You called me your pussycat. Come here, my little pussycat, you would say. And I knew I was loved. Thank you. At a party, you would find me and hug me fiercely and take my hand and say, come with me, I want to show you off. And you would take me around the moose and to everyone that you wanted to show me off to. I wanted to show you off too. We held hands in the car when you visited and walked arm in arm at Old Town. You pet my head, told me how much you loved me and how beautiful you thought I were all the time. I felt like we were little girls who were best friends, laughing and giggling, being silly. I told you I loved you and how beautiful you were too. You taught me songs, and here's one of them. Mares eat oats and does eat oats and little lambs eat ivy. A kit'll eat ivy too, wouldn't you? Eat oats and does eat oats and little lambs eat ivy. A kit'll eat ivy too, wouldn't you?
Oh, if mares eat oats and does eat oats and little lambs eat ivy. I don't know.
She didn't teach me the second.
Shining.
There's he does.
Dozy dotes and little lambs eat ivy, a kiddly ivy too. What is you? And I've taught that song out to my daughter, Aria Rose, who's 4.
No, I forgot that song. Oh my God.
I remember sitting in her living room as a child in Connecticut on her lap. And then we got in a rowboat position after that song. We put our feet together and our hands. I must have been 4 or 5, and we rowed back and forth and sang. Well, we sang the splashing in Water's Dash.
Here's how we
Here's how we splash in Water's Dash. Yeah. So, thank you, Grandma, for being in my life. Thank you for making an effort for me. Thank you for being such a beautiful, creative, adventurous, capable, and successful, fun person. Thanks for being you. I love you. Your pussycat. Yes.
Where's the tissue box?
Wait, can I take one? Can I take one? Can I have one?
If nobody else is interested in this.
Ginger, I have.
Huh? Yeah.
Oh, we'll just have a few. Anyone over here? Oh, a moose.
I found it.
Pat, come up front.
Come up front. Because there's all people in here that won't be able to hear.
Can you come this way, Pat?
Can I do it from here on? It's not that much. Ethel was Ken and Ginger's birth mother, but she was also my mother. In the summer of 1988, I was helping out in the kitchen at Once Upon a Moose when my mother passed away suddenly and unexpectedly. Ethel said to me, "I am now your mother." And from that time on, I called her my Seacliff mother. Many of you here know my story. My Seacliff mother went to work immediately, and by October, she had talked me into dating Will. Although I had reservations, she kept telling me over and over that he was a good man. Well, we fell in love, and in December of that year, Will and I invited Ethel and Oscar out for dinner and told them that we planned on being married. Ethel scouted out all the stores, took me to find my wedding dress, helped me make plans, and prepared and hosted our wedding reception. And she was absolutely right. Will was a wonderful man. We were perfect for each other, and we enjoyed 23 years together until he passed last June. She was always the most important person in our lives. I could talk with Ethel about anything and everything. She always listened. She gave me advice or words of encouragement. When I was with her on that last Wednesday afternoon, and as weak as she was, she perked up and was giving me advice on exactly how to cut off the Japanese kimono I had brought home. However, if she felt I was wrong or had stepped out of line, she would tell me immediately, and there she would mince no words. I knew exactly where I stood. I had my own mother for 45 years. I knew Ethel for 41 years. I have been truly blessed to have had 2 wonderful mothers in my life. Thank you.
You know, looking around this room and we're seeing our lives flash in front of us. It's like from so many different places and pieces of our lives. And I think that, you know, Sally, when you walked in, you said you didn't really know my mother, and I think maybe you get a little bit of a glimpse of who she might have been. So I hope that that was the case for all of you who didn't know her, and for those who did, we just know that we were blessed in so many ways. I don't want anybody to get the idea that this was a perfect person. She was not. We all knew that. But you know what? We loved her anyway, and she loved us even though she knew we weren't perfect. And those are people here who worked with her, people who... I want to tell you one thing, that right before she died, and she was very sick, she had her car in the back. And this is just an example of who she was. She wanted to get back to Connecticut, and she took that car in a big rainstorm against my, and when she left, she railed at me with her cane. I'm not going to follow your rules. And I said, her way. She went up to Connecticut, she went to New Fairfield, she went to the bank, she went to the post office, she stopped in the Mexican restaurant for lunch. They helped her bring her food into the car because she couldn't hardly eat anything, but she needed to do this. She drove up there and back, got home at 7 o'clock at night in the storm, not knowing how even to turn the defroster of the car on or to get gas in her car. I think she came back and the car was empty. And I was angry because she didn't know how to use her cell phone and didn't want to. Hated cell phones, hated computers. She wanted to know why the home health aide kept sitting there going like this. She said, "What's she doing?" And I said, "She's texting." She said, "Why is she doing that?" But she was full of life. She always had something. I mean, she loved watching The Bachelor and Dancing with the Stars, and loved making comments about everybody. And she would love that everybody was here today and miss you all. I just want to let you know that there is food.
Can I just say,
we're not starving you
a
out.
little something to add?
You do?
Yes. Is that okay?
Yes. And there is a book that's somewhere that I would like everybody to sign if you can find it. It's on the table. It's on the table.
I just wanted to say, I didn't know Ethel really well, but my mom lived in Seacliff, and independently of me, she was friends with Ethel. And one of our big treats together as mom and daughter was to go to the Moose and have a po' boy. We always both ordered a po' boy with a free glass of white wine. And she used to have all these little things for sale. And my mom, at the age of like 80 or something, actually bought one of her little pocketbooks. It was a stuffed animal with a zipper. And my mom would wear it. They were like kindred souls. And she created such a wonderful space for everyone to visit, and delicious food too. So.
I think Rick was a very, very old and dear friend. Not old. He's older now than he was, but so are we all.
He ate the most meals in the most.
Oh yeah, he holds the record.
He has the record.
All right, so where are we at? I think I first met Ethel indirectly, because I was driving up Glen Cove Road one day, and I passed through East Hills, and I'm just passing by this two orange rocks. There were two orange rocks on the side of Glen Cove Road in East Hills by Nobbhill, and these two orange rocks seemed odd in the middle of this highway there, this road. And then I looked in, and there's a little sign by the rocks that said "Estate Let for Sale." And I look at it, and there's this drop-dead gorgeous house, big picture window in the